Beloved, hear this with urgency, because not everyone will. Today is not just another day on the calendar. This is September 1st, 2025, a day that carries prophetic weight in heaven's time clock. The world hears the noise of politics, markets, wars, and distractions, but in the midst of the storm, the voice of the Lord is speaking. Yet not all will hear. Only those set apart, only the chosen, only those who tune their ears to heaven will discern this word. This is not a message for the casual. It is not for the comfortable. It is for those who understand that history is converging with prophecy and that every moment carries eternal weight. There are moments in life when everything around us feels like it is breaking, collapsing, and roaring with such volume that it drowns out our peace and blinds us to the very voice we are desperate to hear. Yet the truth is, the voice of God is not always in the earthquake, not always in the fire, not always in the chaos of the storm, but in the still small whisper that requires silence of heart to discern, and that is where the chosen are separated from the crowd. For many will chase the noise, but only a few will bow their ears to the whisper. Imagine for a moment a man caught in the noise of a busy city street, horns blaring, people shouting, sirens wailing. Yet as he stands frozen by the chaos, he suddenly hears the faint call of his child's voice behind him. So soft, almost drowned by the uproar. But because it is the voice of someone he loves, he recognizes it instantly, and that recognition cuts through the noise like a sword, drawing him with urgency. So it is with the voice of God, beloved. He speaks, but he does not compete with the world shouting. Rather, he whispers, and only those whose hearts are tuned to love him, to seek him above all else, will recognize and respond. This is why so many miss him, because they are addicted to the drama, intoxicated by the noise, desperate for the spectacular, when in truth the Almighty is training his chosen to hear what others dismiss, to walk in revelation when others are paralyzed by confusion. This very principle is anchored in the story of Elijah on Mount Horeb, weary, broken, and fearful after confronting Jezebel, hiding in a cave desperate to know what God would say next. And suddenly a mighty wind tears through the mountains, but God is not in the wind. Then an earthquake shakes the ground, but God is not in the earthquake. Then a fire blazes with consuming fury, but God is not in the fire. And then comes a gentle whisper, and Elijah wraps his face in his cloak, for he knows this is the Holy One speaking. Oh, how profound this is! For it reveals that the chosen must learn to ignore the dazzling, the shaking, the terrifying, the distracting, and instead lean into the silence where God is waiting. And it is there, in the quiet chambers of obedience and prayer, where destiny is spoken, and how this applies to our lives today is undeniable. How many of us stand in seasons where everything is shaking, where the winds of fear howl, where the fires of trial consume, and the earthquakes of uncertainty rattle every foundation we thought secure, and yet in those very seasons God is not absent. He is whispering, but only those who choose to still their soul will catch it. I recall a story of a young woman who was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and while the doctors gave her no hope, while friends flooded her with advice, noise, and endless opinions, she made a decision to retreat into the quiet presence of God daily, to shut the door, silence the phone, and open her heart to listen. And there, in the midst of her darkest valley, she heard the whisper of God reminding her that he had the final word, that her story was not finished, that his power was greater than her diagnosis. She clung to that whisper when nothing else made sense. And though her healing did not come overnight, the whisper guided her through treatment, gave her strength when her body failed, filled her with peace when fear surrounded, and ultimately brought her into a place of full restoration. Beloved, it was not the noise that saved her, it was the whisper, the word from God that others could not hear, because only the chosen stopped long enough to listen. And this is the call for us today, in an age of distraction, where every device screams for our attention, every headline shakes us, every crisis demands panic. The chosen must live counter, culturally training their spirits to hear the whisper beneath the roar, because in that whisper lies instruction. In that whisper lies revelation. In that whisper lies the next step. And without it, we risk being led by fear rather than faith. So I tell you, the chosen are not defined by their ability to shout louder than the world, but by their ability to listen deeper than the world. For when you train your ears to hear the whisper of God, you begin to walk in a confidence that no storm can break. You begin to see doors open that no man can shut. You begin to receive answers before questions are even formed, and your life becomes anchored not in what is loud, but in what is eternal So let the world chase the earthquake. Let them fear the fire. Let them tremble at the wind. But you, child of God, be still enough to hear the whisper, for that whisper will set the course of your destiny, and only the chosen will discern it. In a world obsessed with fame, applause, and recognition, where people measure their worth by likes, followers, and the roar of the crowd, there is a higher calling that cuts against the grain of human desire, and that is the call to obedience. For while the world celebrates popularity, heaven celebrates obedience. And while people are crowned for their influence, God crowns those who bend their will to his whisper. And herein lies the mark of the chosen. They do not move because it is convenient. They move because God has spoken. They do not bow because the majority bows. They bow because the Spirit directs. Think of how many destinies are lost chasing the approval of man. How many callings are buried because of the fear of being different. How many voices remain silent because they tremble at what people will say. Yet the chosen understand that obedience is greater than sacrifice. That one act of surrender carries more eternal weight than a lifetime of applause. I think of a young man who was offered the opportunity of a lifetime, a career that promised wealth, recognition, and the chance to finally be somebody. In the eyes of the world, yet deep inside, he felt the nudge of God warning him that the path ahead would entangle him in compromise and distance him from his true purpose. And though everyone around him told him he would be a fool to say no, though his family, friends, and colleagues pushed him toward the open door, he chose instead to obey the whisper, to walk away from the glitter of popularity and walk toward the uncertainty of God's promise. And while at first he seemed to lose everything, status, opportunity, security, he discovered something far greater, the peace of knowing he was in the center of God's will. And as years passed, doors opened that no man could have manufactured, opportunities arose that carried no stain of compromise, and his influence became deeper, not because of popularity, but because of purity. Beloved, this is the difference between the crowd and the chosen. The crowd lives for applause, but the chosen live for the well done of the Father. The crowd seeks comfort, but the chosen seek obedience. The crowd follows the path of least resistance, but the chosen follow the narrow road that leads to life, even when it costs them everything. And this truth echoes in the story of Saul and David, two kings whose legacies were sealed by their relationship to obedience. Saul, though crowned and celebrated by the people, allowed the opinion of men to outweigh the command of God, sparing what he was told to destroy, fearing the rejection of the people more than the displeasure of heaven. And in that moment, his kingdom was torn from him, for popularity without obedience is an empty throne. But David, though despised by his brothers, overlooked by his father, and hunted by the king himself, carried in his heart a relentless obedience to God, refusing to raise his hand against the Lord's anointed even when the chance for revenge was within his grasp. And because of his obedience, not his popularity, God exalted him from the pasture to the palace, from the forgotten son to the chosen king, from the shepherd boy to the man after God's own heart. Oh, how profound this is, for it shows us that heaven's promotion is never about how many celebrate you, but how deeply you obey. And it warns us that the path of popularity may elevate you quickly, but only obedience will sustain you eternally. And how this applies to us today is urgent, because we live in a generation addicted to being seen, where the loudest voice often overshadows the truest one, where compromise is celebrated if it brings applause. And yet the chosen must rise with a different spirit, willing to be misunderstood, willing to be mocked, willing to be overlooked, if it means staying true to the voice of God. Do you not see, beloved, that every act of obedience, no matter how small, is a seed that bears eternal fruit? To forgive when others hold grudges, to speak truth when others remain silent, to walk away from sin when others embrace it, to say yes to God when the cost is high. These are the marks of the chosen. These are the acts that move heaven. These are the decisions that echo in eternity. And though obedience may strip you of popularity for a moment, it will clothe you in favor for a lifetime, for the applause of men fades as quickly as it comes. But the favor of God endures forever. So let the world chase the spotlight, but you, child of God, chase the whisper. Let them measure themselves by crowds, but you measure yourself by obedience. Let them seek the approval of man, but you seek the approval of heaven. For in the end, when the crowds are gone and the lights have dimmed, it will not be the shouts of the people that matter, but the voice of the King saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant. And so I tell you with urgency, in this season of shaking, God is not looking for the popular. He is looking for the obedient. He is not looking for the celebrated. He is looking for the consecrated. He is not looking for the one who has the most influence, but for the one who is willing to be still enough, humble enough, and surrendered enough to simply obey. For it is obedience, not popularity, that will mark the chosen in these last days. There comes a moment in every chosen life when the ground begins to shift, when doors once wide open suddenly slam shut, when people who once walked beside you drift away, when the comfortable patterns of yesterday no longer fit today, and though it feels like loss, though it feels like rejection, though it feels like abandonment, in reality, it is the hand of God separating you, because before He elevates you, He must first set you apart. And this is one of the hardest lessons the chosen will ever learn, for our human hearts cling to familiarity, to relationships, to habits, to comfort zones, yet heaven cannot pour the oil of destiny into vessels still chained to Egypt. Beloved, separation is not punishment. It is preparation. It is the pruning before the fruit, the wilderness before the promised land, the solitude before the anointing, and only those who endure the pain of separation will taste the power of elevation. Think of a young woman I once knew who had built her whole identity around a circle of friends who defined her choices, her worth, her vision, and though deep inside she felt the tug of God pulling her higher, she resisted because she feared being alone until one season those very friends turned on her. Doors of opportunity she relied upon suddenly closed, and she found herself in what she described as desert of silence, misunderstood, rejected, left with nothing but her faith. But it was in that desert that she began to hear the voice of God more clearly than ever before. It was in that place of separation that new gifts began to awaken within her. It was in that hidden season that she discovered who she truly was apart from the approval of others. And in time, God brought her into a position of influence far beyond what she had once clung to. And she realized what she thought was rejection was actually redirection. What she thought was abandonment was actually alignment. And what she thought was loss was actually preparation for greater gain. This is the divine paradox of the chosen. God removes before He multiplies. For He multiplies, He isolates before He elevates. He prunes before He causes to bloom. And this is beautifully seen in the story of Joseph, a young man who dreamed dreams of greatness, dreams of elevation, dreams of ruling. But before those dreams came to pass, he had to endure the tearing of separation, sold by his brothers into slavery, ripped from his father's house, falsely accused and thrown into prison, forgotten by those he helped, left alone with nothing but his God. And yet every step of separation was a step of preparation, because the pit separated him from pride, the house of Potiphar separated him from dependence, the prison separated him from self-reliance, until finally he was ready to step into the palace, not as an arrogant dreamer, but as a humble vessel of God's wisdom and power. And when elevation came, it came suddenly, it came gloriously, and it came with purpose that not only saved his family, but preserved a nation. Beloved, do you see it? Separation is never wasted. Separation is never random. Separation is never the end. It is always the process by which God prepares His chosen for assignments greater than themselves. But the tragedy is that many resist separation. Many run back to the chains God is trying to break. Many cling to what God is trying to remove. And in doing so, they delay their elevation. But those who trust the hand of the potter, who allow themselves to be shaped in solitude, who embrace the wilderness, will one day look back and thank God for every closed door, every lost relationship, every quiet season, because they will see that without this separation, they would never have been strong enough, pure enough, or ready enough for the elevation. And this word is urgent for us today, because we live in a culture that fears being set apart, that dreads being different, that idolizes belonging. But the truth is, you cannot be both chosen and common. You cannot walk in divine elevation while clinging to worldly attachments. You cannot carry heaven's mantle while holding on to Egypt's chains. And so if God is separating you, if He is stripping things away, if He is calling you into a wilderness, do not despise it, do not resist it, do not mourn it, but embrace it, for it is the sign that elevation is on the horizon. And though separation is painful, remember this: Jesus Himself endured it, for He was separated from the crowds to pray in the mountains alone, separated from His disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane, separated from the comfort of heaven to walk among us, and ultimately separated from the Father on the cross, so that you and I would never have to be separated from His love. And if the Son of God was willing to be separated in order to be elevated to the place of glory, how much more must we accept the same process if we are to fulfill our destiny? So I urge you, beloved, do not fear when people walk away. Do not tremble when the door shuts. Do not despair when the wilderness comes. For every separation in God is a sign that elevation is coming, and the pain of today is the proof of the promise of tomorrow. So lift your head, steady your heart, and trust that the God who separates you is the same God who will elevate you, because he never removes without restoring. He never strips without clothing anew. And he never calls you apart without intending to send you forth, for separation always comes before elevation, and only the chosen will endure it long enough to see its glory. We live as though time is infinite, as though tomorrow is guaranteed, as though the moments that slip through our hands will always return. But the sobering truth is this time is short, eternity is near, and every breath we take is one step closer to the day when what is unseen becomes all that matters. And this reality should awaken us from the sleep of complacency. Life is but a vapor, here today and gone tomorrow. And yet how easily we spend it on distractions that will not matter in the light of eternity, chasing wealth, chasing applause, chasing possessions, while neglecting the one thing that will never fade, the state of our soul before God. I think of a man who built his entire life around his career, climbing the ladder, sacrificing time with his family, ignoring the quiet voice of God calling him closer, always saying, I'll pray tomorrow, I'll spend time with my children next week, I'll surrender when I'm older. Until suddenly illness struck, and in a matter of months the empire he had built meant nothing. His wealth could not buy him more time. His influence could not secure him another day. And lying on his hospital bed, he wept not because of what he had accomplished, but because of what he had ignored, the eternal things that truly mattered, the unseen treasures that moth and rust cannot destroy, the legacy of faith, the love of family, the presence of God. Beloved, do you see? Eternity is not far away, it is one heartbeat away, and the chosen understand this urgency. They do not waste time on what cannot cross the threshold of eternity. They live every day with a heavenly perspective, knowing that what is done for Christ is the only thing that lasts. And this reality echoes powerfully in the story of the rich fool that Jesus told, a man who stored up barns full of grain, who said to himself, "Eat, drink, be merry, you have plenty for years to come." But that very night his soul was required of him, and all his wealth, all his comfort, all his plans vanished in an instant, for he had invested in time but neglected eternity. And Jesus warned, so it is with anyone who lays up treasure for himself but is not rich toward God. Oh, how this should shake us, for how many of us are guilty of the same? Living as though life is secure, as though our days are endless while eternity draws nearer with every sunrise. Yet for the chosen, this truth is not a cause for fear, but a call to urgency, a call to live intentionally, to forgive quickly, to love deeply, to serve faithfully, to speak boldly, to pray fervently, because we know that our assignment on earth is brief, but its impact can echo forever. When you realize time is short, you stop wasting energy on petty offenses. You stop clinging to bitterness. You stop investing in things that perish, and instead you set your eyes on eternity. You seek first the kingdom. You pour yourself into what will meet you on the other side of glory. The chosen know that every act of kindness, every prayer uttered, every word of truth spoken, every sacrifice made for the sake of the gospel is a seed planted in eternity, a treasure stored up in heaven. And when the day comes to step from time into forever, those seeds will bloom into a harvest that will never fade. Do not be deceived by the illusion that time is abundant, for the clock is ticking. Prophecy is unfolding, and eternity is nearer than we realize, but let this not fill you with dread. Let it fill you with determination. Let it awaken you to live as one who is passing through, as one who knows this world is not your home, as one who holds loosely to the temporary and clings tightly to the eternal. The Apostle Paul captured this urgency when he said, "The time is short, for the present form of this world is passing away." And he lived as though every day could be his last, pouring himself out like a drink offering, pressing on toward the prize, running the race with eternity in his eyes. And so must we. So I charge you live today as if it were your last, not in fear, but in faith, not in despair, but in determination. For the reality of eternity should not paralyze us, but propel us. It should not crush us, but call us higher. It should not fill us with panic, but with passion. Because if time is short, then every moment is sacred. If eternity is near, then every decision is weighty, and if heaven is real, then nothing else matters more than being ready. And when that final day comes, when time gives way to eternity, when the clock of earth strikes its last moment, may it be said of us that we did not waste our days chasing the wind, but that we lived as chosen ones, burning with purpose, faithful to the end, prepared not just for the grave, but for glory, ready to step into the eternal embrace of the one who is forever. There comes a point when the night seems so thick, so consuming, that the human heart trembles at the thought of ever seeing light again. And yet it is in those very moments that the purpose of the chosen is revealed. For the darker the night, the brighter the stars shine, and the heavier the shadows, the more radiant a single flame becomes. And this is why those who are set apart cannot shrink back when darkness increases, but must rise up, because they were never called to blend in with the night, but to pierce it with the brilliance of God's light within them, beloved. We live in an hour when the world is drowning in confusion. Morality is twisted. Truth is mocked. Faith is ridiculed. Hope is fragile. And many hearts are fainting for fear of what is coming upon the earth. And yet this is the very stage upon which the chosen must step forward, not in fear, not in silence, not in retreat, but in radiant boldness. For light was never meant to hide, and salt was never meant to remain in the shaker. And if there has ever been a time for the chosen to shine, it is now. I think of a young nurse I once heard about who worked in the middle of a war zone, surrounded daily by destruction, suffering, and despair, where the cries of the wounded filled the night and the air smelled of smoke and blood, and while others around her gave in to hopelessness. She chose to walk into the darkness every day with a quiet determination that she would not let despair win. She prayed over patients who were unconscious. She whispered words of life over children trembling with fear. She sang hymns softly in the corridors so that even the walls seemed to echo hope. And when asked how she could remain so strong in the face of such overwhelming darkness, she replied with tears in her eyes, "Because I am not the light, I simply carry the one who is." And her testimony spread, igniting faith in both soldiers and civilians, not because she had answers for the chaos, but because her light refused to go out in it. And this, beloved, is what it means to shine in darkness, not to have all the answers, not to escape the struggle, but to carry within you a flame that no storm, no war, no hatred can extinguish. And this is beautifully reflected in the words of Jesus himself, who declared, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden," reminding us that our identity as chosen ones is inseparable from our calling to shine. And perhaps nowhere in Scripture is this seen more powerfully than in the story of Daniel, a young man ripped from his homeland, forced into exile in Babylon, surrounded by idolatry, immorality, and a culture determined to erase his identity. And yet, instead of blending in, instead of bowing down, Daniel resolved in his heart to remain faithful to God, to pray even when prayer was outlawed, to stand when everyone else bowed to idols. And because of his unwavering light in the midst of overwhelming darkness, kings took notice, nations trembled, and God's glory was revealed in a pagan land. Daniel did not shine because his circumstances were easy. He shone because his heart was steadfast, and his life teaches us that light is most visible in the darkest night, and that one faithful voice can silence lions, shift kingdoms, and testify to the greatness of God. Oh, how desperately this truth speaks to us today, for we too live in a spiritual Babylon, surrounded by compromise, seduced by idolatry, pressured to conform. And yet the chosen must dare to be different, dare to shine, dare to carry their light even if it costs them everything, because our calling is not to escape the world, but to illuminate it, not to curse the darkness, but to dispel it, not to hide from the storm, but to glow brighter in the midst of it. And here lies the mystery. Darkness has no power over light. No matter how vast the night, it cannot extinguish the smallest flame. And this means that no matter how overwhelming the evil of our generation may appear, the light within you is stronger, for it is not your light, but His. And if you will dare to let it shine, you will become a beacon for those lost in despair, a compass for those searching for truth, a testimony for those drowning in lies. And yet how often do we hide our light out of fear, out of shame, out of worry about what others will say, forgetting that light hidden under a basket serves no purpose, and salt that loses its flavor is worthless. Beloved, the chosen cannot afford to be silent in this hour, for silence in the face of darkness is agreement with it, and compromise in the presence of corruption is surrender to it. But when you shine, when you declare truth in love, when you live with integrity, When you forgive where others hate, when you remain faithful where others waver, you preach a sermon louder than any words could speak, and you declare that the darkness will not win. So do not wait until the world becomes safe to shine, for light is not needed in the day, but in the night. Do not wait until people applaud you to live boldly, for true courage is standing firm when no one else does. Do not wait until the storm passes to sing, for it is the song in the storm that reveals the faith of the chosen. And do not despise your small flame, for one spark in the hand of God can ignite a fire that changes nations. And this is the promise we hold on to, that the darker the world grows, the brighter the chosen will shine, until the day when the light of the world himself returns and every shadow flees before his glory. So rise up. Beloved, do not dim your light to make others comfortable. Do not hide your fire because it offends the darkness. Do not shrink back because the cost is high. But stand tall like a city on a hill. Burn brightly like a torch in the night, and let your life declare that even in the darkest hour, the light of God is alive, unstoppable, and victorious in you. Beloved, hear this well, the world may sleep, but the Spirit is awakening his remnant. On this day, September 1st, 2025, heaven is calling, and the question is not whether God is speaking, but whether you are listening. Do not miss your moment. Do not ignore the whisper. Do not trade the eternal for the temporary. The chosen will hear, the chosen will rise, and the chosen will carry the fire of God into the final chapters of history. So I charge you, stand firm, walk boldly, listen intently, shine brightly, for the Lord is speaking and his chosen ones must answer.